Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Thanks for joining us this holiday weekend for another edition of Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskett. As we prepare to head into 2023, this is the time of year we like to look back and reflect on the year that it was. This week on Market Journal, we're taking a look back to some of our favorite stories that we've compiled over the past year. We hope you enjoy them as much as we've enjoyed producing them. First up, when it comes to feeding cattle, it's important to keep in mind that not all hay is created equal. The bottom line here is if you know the quality of your hay, you can make better decisions in terms of supplementation. Earlier this year, Market Journal's Bill Dodd was joined by Mary Dronowski to go over why producers should consider testing their hay.
With hay in tight supply this year, it would be a good idea to test any hay you're planning on feeding your herd in order to ensure you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. Testing hay can help ensure that a producer's cattle are getting the nutrition they need while simultaneously helping avoid any additional costs due to overfeeding.
When we talk about testing hay, really what we're talking about is getting a sample of the hay and submitting it to a lab to get it analyzed to determine the nutrient content. In particular, we're really interested in the protein content, the energy content, and then also phosphorus. If we think about our current situation, if you're short on hay, we may also want to be able to limit how much hay we're actually feeding. And maybe that might be that you can limit feed and still be meeting needs of your cow herd because the hay quality is really good. And this year I would expect that with the lower precipitation, you might actually have some higher quality hay than in previous years. Or you might decide that I want to stretch my hay a little bit. I'm going to limit how much I feed and actually feed some more supplement, for instance. But all of that hinges on actually knowing the nutritional value of that hay to make sure that you actually can meet needs, whether it be by free feeding hay or limit feeding hay.
While testing your hay does add some cost and labor to your overall operation, the potential savings you could incur from the process far outweigh any of the associated costs with the testing process.
Hay testing is not very expensive, especially for common types of hay. You can get an NIR test, which costs maybe $20 for a sample. And if you think about your hay and you think about the amount of supplement you might need to feed, let's say brome grass hay, very common hay that is in eastern Nebraska anyways. From one year to the next, the feed values can vary tremendously. So we can have something that's maybe going down to even like a 48 to 50 TDN up to all the way to maybe even a 58 TDN. Well, that can be the difference between meeting a developing heifer's needs or needing to supplement her 3 or 4 pounds of distillers to actually meet her needs. So on average, the variation in the nutritive content, protein and energy in hay can really result in the amount that you may need to be feeding in terms of supplement, $20 to $40 per head over the winter. So spending $20 to get a hay test versus changing how much supplement you need to change from $20 to $40 per head, easy payback, right? So one of the things we suggest is actually using a hay core sampler. Most of our extension offices have one you can borrow. You can hook them up to a drill. They really can. If they're good and sharp, they can really help you to be able to get a nice representative sample because it goes through multiple layers in the bale and you sample multiple bales and you're going to send off just one sample that represents your whole versus actually taking a grab sample and representing 1 square foot, right? The labs are pretty doggone good at their job, right? They do a good job of analysis, but they're only as good as the sample that they get in.
When sampling your hay, the best practice is to sample by lot. This means if you're sampling from hay obtained over multiple fields with varying soil types and conditions, or if the hay was cut down at different times, you should be testing those as separate lots and not all together. This can give you an advantage when it comes to planning when you would like to feed your cattle hay with higher or lower nutritional values.
Those should be sampled separately. So if you have different fields, different even weed pressures in some fields, you want to make sure you're keeping those bales separate from other bales and actually sampling them separately so you get a better idea of the hay quality that you have, and also allows you to do a little bit more strategic planning, right? The really high quality stuff you might say for your younger, for your heifers, or maybe for your younger cows, and the lower quality might be what you're using to get some of your more mature, older cows through the winter, because it may be closer to their nutritional needs. And Nebraska Extension, our educators and our specialists can always help you once you have the hay test to plan out what you're going to feed to which groups and make a plan for how much supplementation you need. So you don't have to go it alone. You don't have to understand all of the analysis that you get back, but you're giving us more information and new tools to be able to best help you. Otherwise, we're making guesses, and our guesses might be wrong, and those guesses might be costly, right? Because either we do what I would say most of us end up doing, is being a little bit conservative and saying, well, we're going to guess it's a little bit lower quality and make sure we meet needs, and that may be requiring you to feed a little bit more than is actually needed.
When it comes to ensuring your cattle are getting the best nutrition they can over the coming cold months, taking action now and testing your hay could prove very beneficial for your herd and your bank account. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Mary also tells us when sending in your hay samples, you want to make sure that you properly label those samples by identifying the type of hay that's being sent in for testing. If you'd like some additional information on testing hay and how it could save you some cash this year, we've added a link to Mary's Beef Watch article on this topic to our website. It's marketjournal.unl.edu. Next up, we're taking a look back to our most recent trip out to the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory. Since the inception of that research facility in the early 1980s, research and educational programs have become more diverse and team-oriented. This has resulted in several advancements when it comes to range livestock, nutrition, reproduction, and grazing systems, just to name a few. We were fortunate enough to get a closer look at how researchers continue to push range livestock production into the future. Bill Dodd is back with this story.
At the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory, the ranch of the future is a reality in the here and now. It's often been said that necessity is the mother of invention. So when it comes to precision feeding and grazing, new technology is an inevitable step for many cattle producers, and the team here at Gudmundsen are finding out just how these new technologies can benefit producers in terms of range management, input costs, and overall profitability. One new technology being tested here is virtual fencing.
And virtual fencing is a tool that essentially is similar to what you might put on a dog to keep it in your yard. It uses GPS to see where that cow's at, and you're able to create fences on a laptop or a computer that would then keep those cattle within a defined area that you could move frequently. And so we're conducting some research looking at how that might be applicable within a grazing system in the Sandhills. So it's a collar that fits around the neck of the animal, and it gives a sound audio cue when those cattle come up to a line, a user-defined line, and that's as a warning. And if they keep moving on to that, it'll give them a mild shock. And what we found is it's fairly effective, that once cattle learn that behavior, or learn what those signals are telling them, they quickly associate that sound with, okay, this is where I need to stop. And so we're looking at how this affects some of the behavior of cattle, and better understand how this can be used in a larger operation to really manage grazing. And so really thinking about how do we keep cattle away from areas they may graze too much, and maybe put them in areas where they may not like to graze as much, and to help provide a little bit more targeted, strategic type grazing on a landscape.
As far as investing in this type of technology now, the total input cost and savings producers could see with this type of investment haven't quite been determined by the researchers as of yet. However, they have already observed many benefits in both pasture management and labor reductions.
You know, it's really, we're not quite there yet, because it's just kind of getting out of that research phase, I would say. You know, it's just barely becoming commercially available. But we'll learn more in terms of understanding that cost and benefit relationship. The big thing is can it equate to more grazing days? With better distribution, better utilizing the resource, that's probably a benefit, and it cuts down on labor too. You don't need to be out there putting electric fence or other fences in, and it allows some more labor savings in that way.
While grazing and pasture management are crucial for cattle producers, there's still the issue of feed. Getting optimal distribution among the herd can sometimes be tricky, as some cattle can be more aggressive or timid when it comes to feeding. Enter the smart feeder. This tag-based feeding system will ensure that each cow will get the necessary intake for targeted gains.
If I'm feeding a group of cows in a pasture, say there's 100 cows in that pasture, and I'm feeding at some rate of, say, 1 pound per day, I'm going to have boss cows or aggressive cows that will be eating 4 or 5 pounds of that. And I'm going to have cows that do not eat any of it. So you have a wide range in responses from that. And it's really not a uniformed way to supplement cows across that because of the behavioral component of aggressive cows and timid cows. And so one way around that is using technologies like this. And so, if you think about our feed costs in beef production, our cow-calf production, a lot of those in a total production system costs, they make up somewhere around 65% of total costs. And so much of that could be tied up to, I've got cows that are eating way too much and cows not getting anything. And so this feeder right here works off an electronic EID in a cow's ear. So a cow will walk up to it, it registers who that cow is, and they're programmed per cow that, let's say I want to feed 1 pound per day. And so that cow with the EID walks up, it knows who it is, and it will start dropping feed for that cow slowly and allowing that cow to eat. And the focus is really, can I refine my cost of my supplementation by utilizing some of these technologies that give me that precision to control some of those costs much better than we had before of feeding in bunks or feeding out on pastures, etc.
With the integration of new technologies and ranch economics in several areas of research conducted at this facility, Gudmundsen has become an invaluable part in creating plant and animal production systems that aim to make future ranch practices even more economically and environmentally sustainable to the Sandhills region of Nebraska. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Now, if you'd like to learn more about the research and advancements being made out at the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory, we've included an informative link along with this story. You know where you can find them. That is the Market Journal website. Well, the physical characteristics of a plant can reveal a lot when it comes to the underlying genetics. This can help us answer questions like how much water does the plant use or how quickly will that plant grow. By linking traits to these specific genes, researchers are seeking to improve crops by providing higher yields for farmers and creating greater food security nationwide. The science of capturing these characteristics in plants is called phenotyping. We recently got a closer look at the phenotyping experiments taking place at the University of Nebraska Lincoln.
Until recently, phenotyping had been a very time and labor-intensive practice. In the not-so-distant past, researchers had to rely heavily on the looks, touch, and feel of a plant. However, now technologies such as drones, robots, cameras, and laser scanners can measure a field of plants in nearly an instant. One tool that has been immeasurably useful for phenotyping is the University of Nebraska's SpiderCam.
So SpiderCam is really a very advanced phenotyping facility that Nebraska has invested. And so we set up this field experiment. It's about 1 acre in size. And those experiments can ranging from the genetic study to a study of the nitrogen use efficiency or study of the biomass production for the energy crops. And really in the hope to find what is the best performing genetics, right? The varieties in the field, or are there any ways that we can manage the nitrogen or water more efficiently so that we can either save those resources or enhance the efficiency of the plants to use those resources. So all those are within the objectives of our study. So phenomics in that sense is really very widely applied.
As one of only 3 of its kind in the world, this spider cam isn't the type of tech your everyday crop producer will have readily available on their operation. However, the work being done with this machine may someday be applied to unmanned aerial vehicles or drones.
Because you can imagine UAV is small and they are very much limited by their battery, and with that limited payload, what kind of scientific instruments you are going to use is very critical, and what time you fly the UAV is also critical. For example, we have always found out, in order for you to understand the water use, like the drought stress of the plants, the best way to fly UAV is really not in the morning, but right after the mid-noon, in the afternoon when the plant is most stressed. Your chances to be able to look at the stress symptoms is highest when you fly the UAV that time. So therefore, SpiderCam accumulated a lot of the scientific evidences and the data so that we can translate those information better to the UAV systems. And the UAV is heavily used now for the plant breeding purpose, but also even for the larger acre management system. UAV is also used. So we can already see what I'm referring to as the transition of the technology from the pure research to the applied or the production system, and that's already happening with SpiderCam to UAV.
As input costs have continued to rise over the years, researchers working with the SpiderCam technology are already seeing how the data recorded with these systems can lead to better decision-making and ultimately mitigate a sizable fraction of necessary operational inputs.
Today, we are doing research on nitrogen use efficiency and being able to identify the genotypes that is more efficient, and hopefully later on that we can incorporate those specific genes to the commercial varieties. And also we are looking at what are the best technologies really being able to tell which plant is more nitrogen use efficient, right? So that has something to do with using remote sensing and looking at the crop canopy. And the conventional knowledge is greener the plants are, probably more nitrogen they have in their body. But there's a lot more than that, right? So and the nitrogen is a very complicated issue inside of the plants, and there's various chemical forms of nitrogen, and the phenomics is trying to allow us to do better than we just shallowly looking at the greenness of the plants, but we're really trying to tackle a lot of other chemical forms that hopefully we can use remote sensing to be able to tell what is nitrogen concentration, for example, in the plant's leaf. And those would translate into the more advanced technologies, maybe 5 or maybe 10 years later, when the technology cost reduced, then we can be able to apply that at thousands of acres out there, millions of acres.
As growing seasons come and go, the field phenotyping facility near Meade continues to churn out new data every year. Soon enough, you may see new applications of this technology readily available for producers in their fields. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
If you'd like to learn more about phenotyping and the ways in which UNL is helping to create the farm of the future, we've added an informative link along with this story on that Market Journal website. What is now time for weather with Market Journal's Bill Boyer. Bill, big picture, how are things looking as the long-term forecast shapes up? But also want to ask you, the big question usually is centered around moisture, so what can you share with us on that front?
Well, that's certainly right, Bryce, and we're going to start, we'll get to the precip here in a moment. Let's start with this weekend. We're going to see the active weather in the northwest and the northeastern part of the country, where we're going to see some of the more active weather this weekend. And otherwise, the cold air that we've seen dominated here in our region is going to retreat, thankfully, because boy, has it been cold. And we've got some changes coming here longer term to our weather pattern that I think most people are going to appreciate after the cold. Starting with today, we're going to see a few, as we mentioned, in the northwest, maybe some heavier precip, and off into the northeast. That system that was here yesterday and over into early today is pulling away from us. We're going to see a little bit of some snow activity possible early Monday, so your day after Christmas. I don't think it's going to amount to much in our area. Continue to check back into your local forecast for updates. And then as we go Monday night into Tuesday, that system pushes well to the south of us. The next system starts to come on shore, and it'll make its way into the middle part of the country by about midweek, Wednesday into Thursday, giving us another chance of some light snows. Nothing looks too significant with this system. And then we get into the start of next weekend, really a much calmer and less active week than what we've had here. And temperatures are going to moderate after today. Still pretty cold, but notice what happens as we go Sunday, Monday into Tuesday. We start to see that warmth build, especially in the western part of the state, and into the weekend. Generally a little more seasonal and maybe even some above average temperatures in some areas that can certainly need it. Precip chances are not going to get a ton out there. I think any snows are going to be very light, maybe an inch or two total for the whole week. But look at what's coming longer term. Our 8 to 14 day outlook, we show much above normal temperatures, good chances of seeing that, and a decent chance of seeing some above normal precip as well. So longer term, the precip chances are there, and I think we're going to finally get out of the deep freeze.
All right, thank you very much for that update, Bill. Finally today, 2022 will be remembered as a year that saw some massive wildfires across the region. Wildfires can cause immediate loss, such as valuable forage and soil protecting residue cover. The longer-term effects, though, of wildfire on range and pasture can be varied. However, most rangeland plants are quite resilient, and proper management after a fire can speed up that recovery process. We were fortunate enough to catch up with Oklahoma State University Extension Specialist for Rangeland Ecology, Dr. Laura Gudmundsen, to get her advice when it comes to post-fire grazing.
With an abundance of drought conditions and limited precipitation events, wildfires have been fairly prevalent around Nebraska this summer, and that's meant a lot of lost forage for cattle producers. With that in mind, post-fire grazing was a hot topic at this year's Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory open house event. OSU Extension Specialist for Rangeland Ecology, Dr. Laura Gudmundsen, had one take-home message from her presentation that should give some hope to those who have been impacted by these fire events.
My big take-home message, I would say, that is these grasses are very well adapted to grazing and fire. And so, although we have wildfires that happen here, they can recover fairly quickly. It really depends on a couple things. First of all, the management before and after that wildfire, and then also the weather conditions. Do we get rain after that fire for those plants to go ahead and regrow? The longer that you don't get rain and those soils stay exposed, the more likely that you'll have some kind of erosion that's happening, either wind or water erosion. But if it's during a normal year, those grasses can recover really quickly, even within a growing season.
Looking at the immediate aftermath of a wildfire may seem highly discouraging. However, Dr. Gudmundsen tells us following a rangeland fire, odds of recovery are good, and there might even be a slight chance of grazing that land the same year. However, you'll want to cut back on those stocking rates.
With as little rain as has fallen in some places, I'd be reluctant to say go ahead and graze it full blown. So, if you had a lot of people with drought are really trying to hang on to as many cattle as possible, if you really had to graze those pastures, make sure that you're not stocking them normally. You'd want to cut back. But I feel pretty positive, especially after the report on what's going to happen next summer, that if we have normal rain conditions in the next year, everything's going to be back to normal. And if you have good rain after a fire in general, you could probably graze it even within the same year. We do that a lot in our pastures, and it works really, really well in Oklahoma during normal years. So having the right stocking rate that fits your land is really important, and the productivity of your grasses. So figuring out what that stocking rate is and refiguring it every now and then, because sometimes those things can change. I think having an idea of what your productivity is, Extension and NRCS can typically help you with figuring out what your production is. There's also a tool that you could try called the Rangeland Analysis platform to actually figure out what your stocking rate might be, and it's using satellite imagery to estimate productivity. It's a really excellent tool. It's just a website you can find online, and it's free.
Another thing to keep in mind would be the best way to rotate those animals without the need or cost of utilizing additional fence. One possible alternative would be to use a method called patch burn grazing.
And we know it has many, many benefits for lots of different wildlife species. And so I would recommend looking into that if you're somebody that's interested in using prescribed fire. It also has lots of benefits for your cattle as far as reducing supplementation, higher weight gains for yearlings if you're grazing yearlings. And so just grazing, burning a portion of your pasture, stocking it normally, and allowing those animals to graze immediately following that fire. That also can help with stockpiling. And so, planning for drought is a really important part of managing our land, and that provides you to stockpile in those areas that haven't had a burn recently. So those are things that I would think about. There's a lot of things to manage for in these lands. Woody plant encroachment is something that's happening, and we need to get a handle on it for sure, because it decreases productivity far more than drought or anything else. And so where it's happening, and so we need to come up with management strategies where we really protect the areas that are not converting over to woody encroached areas and keep those as grasslands. So fire is just a really useful tool, so patch burn grazing kind of fits within that.
If grazing is planned on burned areas, grazing management practices like sustainable stocking rates and periodic rest need to be applied to promote strong growth of desired plant communities. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
If you'd like to learn more from Dr. Goodman about post-fire land management, we've included a helpful link along with this story at the Market Journal website. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. On behalf of our entire broadcast team, we here at Market Journal would like to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and enjoyable holiday.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.